Good evening, all. I'm Anish Jha, BE Electronics Engineering, your host for today. This session has been brought to you by IIC and IQAC in collaboration with VReach Visit. I would now like to invite Mrs. Navita Kant, Deputy Head of Department, Electronics Engineering, to speak a few words on the initiatives undertaken by VReach Visit.
Good evening, everybody. In Alumni webinar series, we reached 2019-20. I, Navita Khan, Deputy Head of Department of Electronics, would like to share few words about the role of alumni before, present, and in future. Alumni can play an active role in voluntary programs like mentoring students in their areas of expertise. Alumni get in touch with students and share their expertise and best practices in a given field. Queries such as where should I study, which institution is going to secure a good quality education and successful career, who are the successful alumni of the institutions are best answered by alumni when deciding the perfect institute to suit their needs. Universities, colleges, and schools have just mushroomed all over within the past decades worldwide. Students have plenty of choices when choosing the best of syllabus, faculty, and infrastructure. Alumni relations have become a strategic asset for any kind of higher education. Institution willing to stand out from the domestic and international competition. And organizations' alumni are the reflection of its past, representation of its present, and a link to its future. Educational institutions are changing the way they see and interact with their alumni community. With the advent of social media, alumni relationships has taken a different flavor altogether. Universities and colleges have started to harness the power of alumni through various networking platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc., by creating their alumni groups and profiles on them. Alumni offer a strong support system in imparting their skills and experience, their support to their juniors, to the institution, and to each other. Talented alumni have a wealth of experience and skills to share with current students via talks and meets. In certain cases, alumni also offer support in work placements and launching the students' careers. Alumni also donate their valuable time to offer career support to current students. This enhances the students' experience and give them that competitive edge in today's tough job market. Alumni can play an active role in voluntary programs like mentoring students in the areas of expertise. We Reach, initiated by VISIT, is one such initiative to impart skills of the alumni settled in core, non-core, and other type of jobs during a time of change and uncertainty such as COVID-19. Thank you.
That was an excellent description by our Deputy Head of Department. I would therefore like to thank Mrs. Navita Khan to share her knowledge with us regarding the undertakings of We Reach Visit. Good evening and a warm welcome to all the participants today. I am Anish, your host for today, and I'm proud to bring you another season brought to you by We Reach and IIAC. Our topics for today will be different career opportunities in both technical and non-technical sectors, and we'll also be covering the aspects of MBA and GMAT. Our guests for today are Mr. Anand Ramaswamy and Mr. Saurabh Gandhi. Mr. Anand and Mr. Saurabh both graduated with a bachelor's in engineering from electronics engineering in the year 2006 from VESIT. Mr. Anand also completed his management degree from the Indian School of Business and is now currently working as the head of content development at Bolo with Google, with many past experience in the field of teaching and other companies. Mr. Saurabh is currently working at AnyVision as a technical manager for South Asia region and was also the co-chair for SMMC at VESIT, the Students' Forum for Mathematics and Computation. He also got his post-graduation in embedded systems from CETA. I'm glad to have you both on this panel, and I would now like to hand over the podium to Mr. Saurabh Gandhi for his presentation.
Thanks, Anish. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, no, let me start off by thanking you all for hosting this no, immensely insightful series of webinars. And as an alumni, it's an honor to be a part of this initiative. So big thanks to all you students as well as faculties who have made this possible. The topic that I'll be covering today is career guidance, as for what has been decided. But to be honest, it's a very broad topic, and it will be difficult as a single alumni to really do justice to it. So it's good that I have Anand along, and considering the fact that we have students from VESID who I strongly believe are one of the most informed lot of students, considering the exposure that you get during your time at VESID. What I'll do is I'll try to focus more on the opportunities for engineers beyond core tech. So I'll restrict my topic to that during this 15-20 minutes of screen time that I have, and which brings me to actually to my career and what I have been doing so far. So let me just start off by sharing my screen, and then I think I can take it from there. So the storyline for me today is this one. I'll start off with an introduction to my college life, and I'll also share some of the goals that kept me going during my time at VESID. I'll then give you a brief of my career so far, some insights into the organizations and startups that I have been attached with. I'll also try to focus more on the whys and hows, and how I got there. And I truly believe that this is something that should help you all as well as the folks out there to relate to the context of my presentation. I will then also try to introduce some of the frontline roles, and I'm not sure as engineers how seriously do we look at them. So I'll try to throw some light on that and demystify some of these roles. To the end, I'll try to highlight some skills which are going to be useful if you are considering these kind of frontline roles with any B2B organization. So this is going to be in a nutshell my content. Starting off with this slide, of course, brings back a lot of memories, and I still remember being one of the many diploma guys to have joined VESID in the second year of degree. I had the luxury of selecting virtually any college in MU, being 8th in Maharashtra and diploma. But what really fascinated me towards VESID is the culture and the stories that I heard from some of my cousins who happen to be alumni of VESID. So they were also some of the most influential mentors that I had during my time at diploma. And that is something which got me to VESID. Like many other diploma students who enter, I had this stereotype to break and take care of, which is the fact that diploma students are weak at mathematics because of the fact that they have entered a technical career right after their SSC. And this is something that, of course, I was very cautious about when I entered VESID. And in fact, it became one of my goals to be focused on maths, as well as I used that to make it one of my key strengths. So that is in fact some of the things which took me to being focused on maths, both as an academic subject, being a chairperson of one of the society in maths, as Anish introduced, which is the Students Forum for Mathematics and Computation. And I also remember, and I'm sure Anand will second that, being one of the most sought after resource in the class as far as MATLAB as a language was concerned. So that's some of the fascination apart from core tech, which diploma students have, which I developed. And this in turn helped me also develop an interest in subjects like image processing and computer vision, apart from core tech subjects. So by the end of it, all this exposure that I had during my time at Visit helped me during my campus placements. But unfortunately, the liking for core tech also made me reject one of the offers from TCS. I was also fortunate enough to be landing a job through an off-campus drive with Siemens, and that is something that as students of electronics we consider that Siemens should be one of the really good organizations to be in if you are interested in a core tech job. So before I move on to this slide, I would also like to highlight that societies in Visit have definitely been one of the key turning points, and you will realize it as I progress my discussion on the career, that the way it has impacted in shaping up what I am today. Apart from the fact, apart from the societies, I would also like to highlight, as Shirsagar sir earlier mentioned, the exposure to events like Elecrama is one of the rare privileges that we got during our times at Visit. And this was a time when there were no social networks like LinkedIn, and these were the kind of exposures which helped us build a social network. So with that, let me move on to the next slide. And this slide in a nutshell summarizes the past 13 years of my life, right from me joining Siemens, and this is in a nutshell the entire journey. So if I start off with my journey at Siemens, I joined as in the role of a design and estimation engineer, and as I mentioned here, I realized in due course of time that I was too early for this role, because most of my peers in Siemens, they were in this role after having some kind of a technical exposure early in their career. So bid management or design and estimation is something which is more on the marketing side, and as a fresher to get directly into this kind of a role was a very challenging and at the same time kind of disappointing, because you expect to see a lot of core tech after having joined Siemens. Are there any questions that I see some coming up in the chat which I need to see right now, or should I take this at the end of it?
You can take it right now, or it's better if you take it at the end, because
I'll prefer taking at the end so that I can complete the flow that I have and then I can look at it. So from Siemens, one of the questions that I had early in my career at Siemens is, where is all the good work done? And by good work, what was my definition of good work at that time is where is all the development done? I happen to have a few good colleagues who took me to the light that if you really are interested in good work, and if you look at such companies in India, all the good work is done outside. So if you look at Siemens, it is all done back in Germany. And that is where I got this advice to really look at startups or small organizations if I am really interested in doing any core tech. This is what made me capitalize one of the turning points, which is my exposure to Elecrama and the folks I had met. I was lucky enough to meet one of the budding entrepreneurs from Think Labs during that time, and that brought me to an offer to join Think Labs, which was one of the startups that I joined right after 4 months in Siemens. So with Think Labs, let me just give you a background. I was one of the first 10 employees along with Anand who have joined Think Labs. One of the really good opportunities, I would say, and I was fortunate enough to have landed in that role. It was a company which worked in the education space with a dream of being a product company. And just 2 years down the line, I was one of the prime contributors in the embedded systems and image processing initiatives within that company. I had the privilege of training some of the big organizations. Indian Air Force, Indian Navy happened to be some of them, and this is something that you can only imagine 2 years down your career doing in a startup. And this is one of the key advice to all the engineers out there. If you have an opportunity for joining a startup, I think you should make it happen. Considering the learnings that you will have, I mean, the very steep learnings that you will have in the initial stages of your career. So while I was with Think Labs, it was a very satisfying role. At the end of the day, however, you still find some pieces missing. And with Think Labs, there were two key pieces that I found missing, and which is also the flip side of being in any startup, that it is too much driven by someone who funds them. And in this case, it is the venture capitalist, and they also happen to shape the roadmap of the company. So what really happened during my time at Think Labs is there was too much of focus into the company being a tech training company rather than a product company. Also, while I was talking to my peers, somewhere I was missing the brand association. So with all these thoughts flourishing in my mind, I got an opportunity to work with Godrej Security Solutions. This was again an offer too hard to resist, because it was a big brand, plus computer vision, plus a newly formed team. So it was almost a startup-like culture out there at Godrej. If I have to just look back, 80% of my career so far has been spent in Godrej, and that I have hence a special association with Godrej. Also, video surveillance, which was my area of work at Godrej, was one of the most exciting domains to work with as someone who has a deep interest in computer vision. So in these 9 years that I spent in Godrej, I graduated from being in development roles to then moving into product management, which is more facing the sales team, convincing the internal stakeholders, and then going into pre-sale roles. One of the things that I realized during my tenure at Godrej when I was working in the pre-sales role is that each time I had to roll up my sleeve and get along with the sales team to assist them close some of the deals. It gave me immense pleasure because I could actually see a direct translation of my efforts driving the company's business. And this was something which was really satisfying, and that's when I really fancied that the frontline roles are something that you should really look out for, because that is where you get to see the wheels rolling. However, as would be the case with any big organizations, there will be challenges like red tapeism, and I realized that one of the most difficult stakeholders to please in a big organization are the internal stakeholders. They happen to be your biggest critics as well. So last year, March 2019 is when I took the leap of faith, and again life came a full circle for me when I joined a startup once again in my career. And this startup is where I am right now. It's called AnyVision. It's a company based in Israel. If many of you would have known that Israel is the startup nation, so it's one of the hub of all the tech innovations out there. And this is something that I was really looking forward to, and that is something where I have been playing a crucial role at this juncture in my life, where I am now a technical consultant. Compared to all my previous roles where I was more in the back office, development, product management, I am now in a 100% customer facing role, which is more challenging and at the same time very exciting. So this is in effect going to be my side of the story to you, which is talking of frontline roles. And after having worked for over 15 months in these kind of frontline roles, one of the things that I wish to share is that the modern day B2B salesmen that we all see, they are more consultants rather than salesmen, because modern day selling is not about selling a product based on some predefined set of features, but it is more about understanding your customers' pain points, and then understanding what you have, introspecting on that, building a pitch around that, and then addressing customers' problems. So this is the fun part of it as well as the challenging part of it. It is more of solution selling, where whereas as a salesman or a consultant, you actually join some parts that you have, you build some parts that you do not have, and you also collaborate with your partners to build an ecosystem to jointly deliver the customer's need rather than building it up all by yourself. So if you can see in these slides, I have tried to focus on some of these frontline roles. Of course, it is common knowledge that if you look at any organization, you would have the product, research and development, and you will have the sales organization. Now, under the sales organization, you have these roles, starting from pre-sales, is where you actually educate the customer before he even starts looking for a product or a solution. Then you move on to a more sales-oriented role where you are actually talking to a customer for an immediate need that he has, to the point where you get into an implementation and a technical support role to actually deliver what he wants. And thereafter, when you look at roles like customer success, what you effectively do is you live with the customer during the entire journey of him using a solution that you have offered, and then understand the nuances of how successful it has been in making him achieve the objectives that he had really set out to achieve. Then again, giving this feedback back to a product management team to incorporate that in the product development cycle and make the whole process iterative in essence. And then using this knowledge to win repeat business from these existing customers. So that is how the cycle out there is, with a close touch point to the product development cycle. So in a nutshell, if I have to summarize some of the winning skills as far as this is concerned, the first of it would be technical acumen, because as I mentioned, it is more about solution selling and less about a set of features. So you need to have a very strong technical acumen to understand your product and see what synergies you have versus what the customer needs. You need to be there with the customer, speak his language. That is where domain knowledge is very important. You will face customers who might not have, trying to make him understand what is it that you have for them in a more non-tech lingo, so that he can make sense of it. And in the end, having a more doctored approach where you try to solve customers' problems, because when you sit down with a customer, he might tell you a lot of symptoms. You have to really deep dive into finding the root cause of the problem, and then see how your offering that the product team has can really help him achieve a solution to their problems. So you have to, in a sense, do a lot of due diligence in what the customer has. You have to understand what are his real pain points and then provide a solution to what, based on what you have. Last but not the least, the golden advice is you have to never stop being a student, and that is how your we are all in very challenging as well as dynamic times. So it's the classroom knowledge that you have learned is never going to be enough. You will always have a customer who can also be a good teacher, provided you have the listening skills. So that's it from my side. I hope that it made some sense on the frontline careers And if there are questions that, with respect to what I have discussed, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. That was a very good session. As they say, it's better to know beforehand what you're going to face rather than going in blind. And Saurabh did exactly that, and chose to tell us what happens in the professional world. This huge amount of experience will be very beneficial for our audience and for myself too. Let's move on to Mr. Anand, who will now shed some more light on the humble beginnings as to how to enter the industry. I now hand over the podium to Mr. Anand.
Hey, thanks, Anish. Let me just start by presenting, and then I can take you through what I have in store. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think first of all, immense thanks to the department as well as the college for inviting us. It's been great to be a part on and off with a lot of initiatives at Visit right since 2006, and I think as alumni, as Saurabh said, right, we owe a lot to the college. After we have passed out for the 4 years that it has given us, and I think the 4 years at engineering. So like what 14 years after engineering right now, we think that the 4 years of engineering has given us the most time to actually figure out what we want to do or which direction we want to go in. And I think that's true for a lot of people. It's not just build the foundation, but given us a way to think forward. So yeah, I'm really happy to be back and sharing these thoughts with a lot of fellow Visitians. So to start off with, we'll just go through my journey, right, and try to see what are some of the core learnings that I felt throughout these years of my career, and see how it can be helpful to any engineer passing out in the current situation. So this is a snapshot of where I was. Right, so 2006 is the year when I passed out of Visit from the electronics stream. So Saurabh and I were a part of the same team, which actually we were runner-up at this competition called as Electrama. So that is where we built a lot of network, and more than that, I think the huge amount of confidence that it built in us was the turning point in our careers, right? As Saurabh said, he had a job offer from TCS, I had a job offer from HSBC, right? Both were into the software field, right? But after the project, we realized that we really want to do something in our core areas, that is electronics. And right after engineering, I got into the startup called as Think Labs, right? I was into the product development. So we were actually, one of the key things that we thought we were missing at engineering was, how much practical exposure can we get? And Think Labs at that time was doing the same. We were taking workshops, we were building products for, budding engineers to, learn microcontrollers, learn embedded system, learn electronics much better. I had the opportunity to join it as I think I was like the third employee there, right? And those were really interesting times. Joining startups at that time was not really heard of, right? But I took a leap of faith and said, what is the worst thing that can happen, right? I might need to look for another job, right? And so I just dived right in. I think that was one of the most formative years of my career. From working in core tech, building circuits, programming microcontrollers, working on embedded systems. As we got funding in the company, right, I went on to lead a product which was for kids. So this product was actually a robotic a robotic kit for kids, right, which can be used to teach science, technology, engineering, mathematics to school children, right? So it was a very interesting problem statement. But what made me interested was actually building a complete product, right? So as we started building it, we built it, launched it, tried it out, and while trying it out, we realized, what we think while sitting within an office while building or designing a product, right? Unless and until the user actually uses it and gives you feedback, you really cannot build a complete product, because there is so much you don't know about, how a user is going to use that product. For example, I would have thought that 30 minutes of runtime is enough for a product, right? But the user is probably expecting 2 hours, because charging it again and again is really a pain, right? So that was the most interesting part of the journey, and that's how I started learning more about product development, right? And as I started interacting with customers, which were actually kids, right, at that point of time, as I said, it was an educational product, so you cannot really unbundle the product and the education part either, right? So since the idea was to teach students through robotics, I started also getting into how to teach students through robotics, right? How to develop content for school students to understand science, technology, engineering, mathematics, etc. through robotics, right? So I started researching, I started learning what are the best ways to teach students. I took a lot of my hands-on sessions on my own to get idea onto that, and we started building the whole product around it. So the product finally ended up being a hardware, a software, and the content around it, right? And that was like my first very serious foray into education, or the ed tech as today it is called, right? Domain. So as the startup started kind of expanding, right, one of the key areas wherein they wanted to focus on was how to stabilize the operations, right? Operations in that time actually meant right from manufacturing, right, to how the product would be used, product would be dispatched, everything, right? So that is something that I was best placed to understand, because I knew the nitty-gritties of the product, right? So I took that up, and as towards the end of my stint at Think Labs, I was heading the operations of the entire the company. But yeah, all good things do come to an end, right? As a startup, everyone has different incentives to be with a startup, or to disassociate with a startup, right? For me, uh, I think the pace of working and the pace of growth, probably which I expected from the company, we were not able to reach there, right? So I said, let's see what the future holds, right? And I had worked with different functions. I had worked with engineering, I had worked with sales, there some pre-sales, I had worked with product development, I had worked with operations. Probably apart, I had worked in most of the functions within that startup, right? I spent about 5 years there, and then I decided, why not try to take this learning and put it in a broader context in terms of management. And I went about doing my MBA from Indian School of Business. The reason I chose Indian School of Business was also because it was a 1-year course. After having spent 5 years in the industry, I really did not want to do a 2-year course from, say, an IIM or from the top tier management institutes, which run a 2-year degree course. So that's the reason I went. I wanted to, choose a shorter course, and I think ISB was best suited for my needs, right? Because it also attracted people who had a similar experience. So I think the 1 year at ISB was really brilliant. Uh, just like the exposure that we get at visit with respect to what all opportunities are there, the kind of friends you make. There's a similar exposure at the ISB, right? The network that you make at ISB is something that helps you a lot after you even pass out, and that was one of my biggest takeaway post ISB. right? The network is something that I still piggyback on for a lot of things, right? From recruiting people to, getting to know what are the new things, to in general, learning and development as well. Post a 1 year stint or 1 year, course at ISB, I had a very short stint with a company called Cognizant Technology Solutions because I said, let me try something new. I've been working in the field of education for 5 years. Let me try something new. But sometimes, some experiences tell you what you don't like, right? Cognizant kind of turned out to be an experience like that. I realized that, this is not what I wanted to do. I was working in one of the newer teams, which was into, a social media business development, right? I realized I didn't want to do that, but what I really wanted to do was get back into the education sector, right? And, develop products for the same. So I got this opportunity with a company called as Next Education, which was kind of like a mid-size startup. And I joined there as a product manager. For the first year, I launched a couple of products. The second year, so I was reporting to the CEO. He said, you launched 2 products. You spent a lot of money building products, right? Now why don't you earn back some money, right? So that's when I took over the business of the products that I had made. I worked on selling those products on ground along with the sales team and a pre-sales team. Sales was hard. Definitely one of the most eye-opening experiences that I had, right? But I learned a lot from that experience, right? And that 1 year of experience gave me a lot of context in terms of how business works and not just how product development happens or something else, right? And moving on from there, I ended up, becoming the vice president in the company, and I was heading the entire product portfolio for their academic products, right from textbooks for kids to actually learning apps for the kids, right? So this is the breadth of products that I was handling. I was handling like a team of around 120 people there. I think here's where I think one of the most interesting things happen, right? Because when you work with so many people, right, when you work with different functions, when you work with your own team, your sales team, a marketing team, etc., you realize that the amount of work that you did previously with people, right, that really starts mattering, right? How do you handle people? How do you ensure that people's voices are heard? People you convince people of certain things that you want them to do, and how do you end up leading people? And a lot of this experience actually came through, probably the start of this experience actually started at Visit, right? When I was working, a part of the society called as Students Forum for Electronics, right? And, mingling with people and working with people, that's the base that it actually, that's the base from where it started off, right? As I spent 7 years almost in Next Education. What I realized was we were a lot more India focused company. I wanted to do something which has much higher scale of impact. I got this opportunity with one of the products at Google to head the content for the product. The product is now called Read Along or Bolo. It's an app which is for kids to learn how to read, especially for kids in the age groups of 6 to 11. And I work on the content strategy, right? From what content to put on the app, how will it appear on the app, how will the child engage with that content, whether the child get points, whether he get something else, right? Everything, right? So that's what I do. And it's a global product right now that helps me understand the scale. And being a product which day-to-day children use, I am also able to see how it impacts their learning. So what excites me, right? I think that's very important to understand for you. This feeling did not really come right at the start of probably my professional career. I had to probably build upon, or I started realizing it slowly, and it might be true even for you, right? On day one, just after engineering, you might not know. Okay, so something that excited me at my first stint and probably till now is how to make learning fun, effective, and accessible, right? Because what I realized after being in these organizations is that we were privileged to have good education, and now education has definitely become stressful, at least in India and a lot of the other countries, right? As competition is much higher, and it's a race, right? How do we make it much more fun, much more effective, right? When you look at school education, you have like 10 subjects to read, right? Half of the subjects you don't even use as you grow up, right? So how do you make it much more effective to learn, and how do you make it accessible? Even today, there are more than 600 million children who don't read at the basic levels that they can, or they should be, right? Because either there is teacher accessibility problems, there is technology issues, there is just, children probably don't have books to read, right? So how do we make it accessible? So these are some things that, these are the questions that I like to think about, and that's what drives me. And with respect to day to day, I love solving problems, right? So working with different functions. So when I say different functions, work with the sales team, understand why something is not selling, work with the marketing team, how to position a product, work with the tech team, how to solve a particular problem, right? Even though I'm not a, core from probably the computer science background, but a broad framework always helps. And working in different functions, right? So, over the period, you develop skill sets through which you work with them as well. So, for this period of professional journey, definitely there are certain learnings which I would want to share, which I hope will definitely help you. So, as time in organization actually increases, right, as you start settling into an organization, being a part of it, etc., right? What happens, right? One thing that definitely you start learning more deeper about is about the industry, right? Even if you don't spend time, you get to know more facets of the industry, right? So for me, it was education. For someone else, it will be different. For Saurabh, probably it was about security systems, etc., right? So you kind of start building this industry expertise as you spend more and more time within an industry. So another thing, as engineers, when you start off, in a job and stick to that particular organization, you start developing on the hard skill sets that you have, right? So if you start off as say as simple as an embedded systems designer, right? You get better at it. You get to learn new tools in the trade. You get to learn, newer technologies. You get to learn newer best practices, right? So you get better at it, right? So domain expertise or the hard skills expertise. Third thing, which is very important, right? But this is something that is the soft skills, right? Managing people, working with people, communicating what you need, communicating what needs to be done, managing a project, timelines, etc., right? So these are things that not necessarily is something that automatically comes around, right? Because this is based on personal interests, right? This is something that is based on what you want to do. It is based on what kind of initiatives you take yourself, and it is also based a lot about the culture of the company that you are in, right? Some companies might not might be very straitjacketed. You are an engineer, you do only this work, right? A startup might be much more open, right? They would probably push an engineer to be a project manager for a smaller team much faster, right? So that helps build people management skills as well, right? But there is no guarantee whether these soft skills automatically get developed, right? This is something that it is definitely much more something that you need to take onus of, right? Rather than a company or an organization which will automatically develop within you. So one of the first learnings, right? As I said, industry experience expertise definitely increases as you move on, right? But what is something that is important to note, as industry expertise decreases, uh, you know, people wanting to hire you becomes more concentrated towards that industry itself, right? So it is much more easier to shift industries at the start of your career than later in your career, right? Because of the deep industry expertise that you start building in, right? Of course, there are exceptions to each and every rule. You might be super competent at a particular hard skill, or you might be super competent as a high soft skill, like you might be just an amazing people manager or a project manager, that you're able to pick up the nitty-gritties of that particular industry, and you might get a shift of industry. But yeah, the thing to take away with here is, if you think you are not liking a particular industry, uh, think about a switch early on, rather than waiting for a good moment to come about or a good opportunity to come your way, right? So second thing, we all there are a lot of different job roles, right? Sort of talked about product manager, sales consultants, tech lead, right? Different job roles are there. What are their function of, right? As engineers, we love to put things into a kind of a formula, right? So so job role typically is a function of three things, right? Your hard skills, your soft skills, and the industry expertise that you build in, right? So these are some examples, right? Some, and I've typically taken only one example from a core tech, that is the tech lead, and examples more from non-tech roles that you can probably have, right? So for example, if you're a consultant, you need some amount of industry experience, right? Because you will help solve the industry's problem, right? Your clients will be people who are expecting you to give them, solve problems for them rather than they coming up with a solution, right? You will be required to have some tech skills, but more at understanding the problem of, formulating a solution. At the same time, the soft skill requirement is high. As Saurabh again said, right? You need to talk to the customer. You need to be consultative. You need to, make sure that you listen. Right? Listening itself is like a very, very important skill. And you need to present your viewpoints such that you are able to convince that particular the client in front of you. Similarly, you have a product manager. When you're looking at, say, a more tech job, right, industry experience might not be too relevant, right? But at the same time, when you're looking at a leadership role, you definitely need a higher amount of soft skills as well, right? So yeah, so whenever you're thinking about the role, this matrix is useful to just evaluate what you're trying to do, right? And this might not be very relevant as you land in your first job, right? But as you move towards like 2 years down the line to into your, probably a second job, or thinking of what to do next, it is good to look at the different roles from this lens. Okay, so I'll just take a bit of time to explain the role of a product manager better, because for the better part of my career, I have actually spent in this role. So yeah, so as the meme says, right, the buck stops here. So the product manager basically is also known as the product owner or the CEO of the product, right? A lot of times he's called the voice of the user, right? Because he is supposed to champion what the user wants within the company, right? So he gives the product direction. He says, what needs to be made, right? Why it needs to be made in a certain way, right? And he works with a lot of cross-functional teams. So engineering teams, design, research, all of these might not report into him, right? But he works with them, right? So let me probably take an example and, the example in context to help you understand this better. So assume that, I'll take an example from, probably my industry itself. You want to make a app which teaches alphabets to the kids, right? So alphabets typically are taught to kids who are at like what, 4 years, 5 years, etc. 5-year-olds. You want to teach them the alphabet, English alphabet, A, B, C, D to Z. So how do you do that, right? So you can just say that, yeah, let's make an app. If you click on A, it will say A. Then you show Apple, etc., etc. You can go randomly throw out like 50 ideas, right? But which is the idea which is best suited for the child, right? Which will be that will ensure that the child is actually learning. Is the best idea possible, right? Is it actually implementable, right? The engineer will come and ask, oh, this is too difficult. Can you really implement? Or I need 50 engineers to implement. Can you really get me the budgets, right? And if everything goes well, how do you actually design it so that the child is able to use it in the best possible way? right? And probably even before that, taking a step back, right? Who is the actual user? Is it the child or is it their parents, right? Probably the 4-year-old child is not going to use it. It's actually the parent who's going to show it, right? So, the product manager has to work towards, solving all these questions on a day in and day out basis, right? Think about the metrics that he wants to understand, right? Wants to track. So, for example, once the product is built, okay, I want 1 million daily active users on this product. 1 million users should actually use the product on a day-to-day basis. So what are the problems in 1 million users actually using? First of all, is it really even possible that 1 million users use it? If yes, how much time are they using? Where are the drop-off points? Are they even completing the login experience or not? Right. So these are the problems that he or she needs to think about. Right. Work with different teams to solve these problems, and ultimately he or she is responsible for the success of the product, right? And that's what in an essence a product manager actually does. So how do you become a product manager? There is no fixed mantra as such. Also the role definition is very fluid across companies. So for example, a product manager, you can even be a product manager in a company like Airtel, wherein the product manager's work is very different from what a product manager's work probably is in, say, a Flipkart or the Myntra, right? So a product manager in Airtel might work on how to bundle the solution much more effectively. So for example, if I have a 399 top up recharge, right? In which geography should I give it? Right, I with 399, how much talk time should I give? How much mobile data should I give? How much should I give a free Wink subscription or not, etc. Right, all these things is something that he understands from user data, right? Makes a hypothesis, tests his assumption, and actually rolls out a different product, right? And in some other company, like say a Myntra, right, or maybe one of the products that I really like is Lenskart. I don't know whether you have tried it, right? So if I want to sell, if I want the users to try out lenses or spectacles, right, what is the best way? Can I actually scan their entire face and make a 3D representation and put a glasses and show them how it would look, right? How do I ensure that the customer is spending time and is having a very seamless experience in actually buying a product on my app or on my website, right? So the roles are very different, right? Across different companies. That's why there's no particular fixed mantra, right? But the typical attributes of any product manager or required in a product manager remains the same. Definitely needed is an appreciation or a knowledge of technology, right? Because the more well-read you are on technology, more you understand the implications and the opinion that you can form, the more better solutions you can suggest. Problem analysis and solving capability. Analysis of problems are easy. Okay, you run through data, you can get 10 things what are wrong with the, or 10 different solutions that can come about from it, right? But how do you solve them? Because solving problems are hard. It's not just coming up with the right solution, but mainly implementation, right? Working with your teams, making sure they're delivering in deadlines, making sure that it is delivered before the competition actually delivers that feature, etc. Right? So the solving capability is something that keeps someone, a product manager, on his toes. Ability to wear multiple hats, right? So as I said, ability to understand research data, ability to understand design, ability to understand tech, even though you might not be a subject matter expert at any of these, right? But you definitely need an ability to understand all this. And one of the key, very, very important things is ability to be a relentless communicator, right? You need to make sure all the teams are on the same page. You need to make sure that people are bought into your idea, your vision, right? They are motivated by what they need to work on next and motivated by the impact of the product. So another things, which help you develop as a product manager is what I would suggest, from my experience at least, is don't be afraid to try new roles, right? The worst that can happen is probably, you might not like it, which is good, right? You can at least cross out saying, oh, I don't like doing X, right? And your career is a huge, long journey, right? It's almost like 40 years, probably more, right? So 1 year of trying a a role which you don't like and you come to realize that you don't like it is not not really bad. It's actually good. A management degree, though it helps, it's not mandatory to be a product manager. Today, I see a lot of companies, recruiting bachelors as associate product managers, and they can move up to product managers. And in some startups, even product managers are recruited right after graduate degree. Probably a couple of years of work experience, right? But yeah, it is still possible. So this is what I all have for now. Right, would be glad to take questions, and thanks again for getting us on this webinar. Thank you. And these are my coordinates. Please feel free to make questions to these as well.
All right. That was an excellent presentation from Anand and Saurabh. Touching all the aspects in the current industry scenario, as how to enter the industry, how different roles can help you. It's, as we all know, it's been 14 years since you were vegetarians. You graduated, you worked at so many different companies, and there's so many things that we would like to ask you. So I think we'll have a small Q&A session. Okay, let's begin. My first question will be to Anand, and this is the $1 million question that everyone seems to be asking. How do you get a job in Google? How do you enter that famed company? The dream job of every engineer. How to get into Google?
So I think, am I audible? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that I would always suggest is being really good at what you do or what you know, right? Because companies. So for example, if I would have just said, okay, I want to enter Google just because it's a great company, probably would not have worked out, because I neither have the technical expertise to become a software engineer, or I might not like some operational role that Google has, right? But why I actually applied to Google was because I liked the role that is there, the role with this particular product, because it was in my domain. Right, I love to challenges in the education space, and my experience was much suited to actually for the role than probably anyone else who applied. Right, so again, taking a step back, I don't think it should be joining about a company, right? Joining a company, and this is the company that I want to get into. It should always be about the work that you want to do. Which will give you the right answers, as opposed to which company you want to join.
Right. So what we are supposed to pick from this is that we need to ditch the pre-college entrance mentality that we need to go to XYZ college/company, and that place or entity will fulfill our dreams, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it, right? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, my next question is to Saurabh. So there's a question, and it's an interesting one. So how do you switch your role from a software developer to a technological product manager? This especially comes from a student who's from the computers department.
Sorry, I didn't get the second half. How do you
okay, so the question was, how do you switch from a software developer, from a role of a software developer to a tech product manager?
Okay, so of course, this is not something that there is a master plan for that, but it is something which definitely happens gradually. It starts off with you being involved more in the tech aspects of the product over a period of time, taking more and more ownership of the why and hows of it, and then moving on to understand what the consumer really needs, and then looking at it from a more introspective in a more introspective manner as to what you are doing and versus what the consumer wants. So I think it is more about building that attitude within you while you are in the development mindset, and then inculcating that to excel at what you want to do.
Okay, so basically, it's us who can change ourselves, and it's not some master plan which will get us to change our job roles.
Yeah, and just to add, no, I think the most important thing which I forgot to mention no, as an alumni is that it is very important to not have all the answers on day one and also not have that expectation, because that is not going to happen. So once you live with that mindset that there are things which you will bump into and learn, I think you will be good to go.
Right. Okay. So that was that. So now the next question, and it is related to the current scenario, and I would like opinions of both of you on this. What do you think is the current impact of COVID-19 on the industries right now? What do you think will be the scenario of industries post-COVID? What will be the recruitment scenario? I would like to begin with Anand. So, what's your opinion on this?
So when you say recruitment scenario, do you mean whether people are going to recruit, or what is the hiring going to be like, or how the work is going to be?
A bit of both. From a fresher's point of view, how's the hiring going to be? Will there be less jobs, or something like that?
In my opinion, jobs are definitely going to get hit, right? Because there are certain industries that will, take for example airlines, which are like a big, big, what we say, clients of a lot of software companies, etc. Right, are going to get hit. Right, there will be lesser amount of money in the market. Right, so jobs will get hit. That is something, a reality that everyone should be aware of. But at the same time, with each crisis, there are opportunities. I believe a lot of startups will come up, right? They will be recruiting, right? Maybe the pay might not be that great, but I think there will be newer opportunities, but it will not be self-evident. It might not be as easy as, a company coming in and recruiting 100 people from the college, right? But that is something that the students might need to work on, right, to identify such places and actually apply to those as well. Second thing, in terms of once recruited, I think the experience of the complete onboarding and initial experience would be very different, right? Right from the huge batches that typically these big MNCs have to for induction, right? That might no longer be a reality. A lot of onus is going to be there on the each recruited engineer to train himself on their own portals, etc. Right? Try out new things, sitting at home and getting themselves up to speed. Right? So you really need a lot of self motivation and not just somewhere sitting in the classroom. So there is going to be a huge shift. So after engineering, where you have been sitting in classrooms, typically the shift was gradual because there would be an induction wherein again you are trained in a classroom setting and then you move on to the job. But now there is going to be a step function shift. You are in a classroom and suddenly you are expected to learn yourself, start being productive, right? Probably while remote working, right? We don't know how long this is going to last.
And Saurabh, what are your thoughts on this?
I think as a job seeker, I would focus my attention and energies on specific domains which might still not be impacted or which might actually benefit from this. So for example, if I talk of security and surveillance, we are a company who offer facial recognition solutions, and as far as this pandemic is concerned, we do understand that it could lead to a downturn in terms of economic downturn, and recessions are always hand in hand with crimes. So this could as well be an industry which might flourish, or for that matter, the healthcare domain. Definitely there will be more requirements in that space, or companies who are more into providing softwares which help remote teams connect and collaborate. So I think these are the places where the opportunities might increase vis-a-vis some of the other domains where it might get impacted. So we should ideally be focusing on these domains.
Right. So I think the best thing, from what I understood, and I think most of the audience wants to hear that post-COVID, there will be opportunities, but it's going to get tougher. People have to, just face everything. They need to be ready, and it won't be the same again, and they will have to have, different set of skills. All right.
Different set
Am I
of
audible?
skills. I think they need to be ready for the new way of working, right? Probably which is definitely different.
Okay. Let's move on to a different question now. So this question is for Saurabh. What do you think, what should be the different skills a student must gather while he is in his or her undergraduate program before sitting for placements and other recruiting programs?
While you are studying, definitely, whenever you sit for a campus placement, at the end of the day, you will be evaluated for what you have studied. So if I'm an electronics engineer, at the end of the day, I'll be evaluated on how well I have done justice to what I have been taught. At the same time, there are some skills which Anand mentioned, like soft skills, which are going to be essential for any kind of jobs. So those are skills which you should really hone, and probably this is a time when you can work on those skills. If there are weak areas that you find out, definitely you have time now to hone those skills. So apart from tech, I think soft skills and a general understanding, because at the end of the day, if you look at a company environment, it is more interdisciplinary. So you should not have the mindset or a barrier that I am an electronics engineer, so I only focus on these set of competencies. If you get to learn technologies like operating systems, containers, Dockers, cloud, I think you should be all open to learning those skills.
Right. I think that was quite a precise and eye-opening answer that, you should be using your time carefully in this lockdown. My next question is to Anand. And again, how is the work culture at massive technology companies at Google different from those companies you had worked for earlier? Anand, you are muted. If you could unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah. Very interesting question. So so Google, I believe, is slightly a different case as compared to any other MNC as well, right? I come from experience as well as talking to a lot of people. In startups, a lot of smaller companies, a lot of decision making is top down, right? In terms of so a product. So let me just compare how a product manager probably works in Google as compared to how a product manager works in say in another startup, right? So at a normal startup, a product manager probably has the final say in how to get things done, right? If he's sure that the customer, this is what the customer wants, the engineering team, the design team, etc. They do come up with opinions, but they end up being a bit more on the implementation side, right? And he's been the when we say the buck stops there for the product manager, he or she drives a lot of decision making, right? But at a company like Google, right, the decision making is highly collaborative, right? So the stakes for any stakeholder, right, is much higher, right? So if engineering lead says that no, I don't think this is going to work, right? The product manager needs to be able to say why it will work with actual backing with data or research, right? It is much more of a collaborative culture in terms of people being able to speak up and expressing opinions, be it, let them be at any level, right? Even a software engineer is allowed to express their opinions in terms of, oh, I don't think this makes sense, can we actually change it, right? And it is, and each opinion is given a good thought and a good ear to actually understand, right? Another difference is that at a lot of startups, and this will be more generic towards any good MNC or much mature organization, where product development is happening as compared to a startup. In a startup, a lot of things is driven by a gut feel and rapid turnaround, right? So you can fail faster and more number of times. But at a more mature, a company like a Google or a Facebook or a Microsoft, decisions are taking after a lot of research which is done, right? So any feature that needs to be developed, there will be a prototype, there will be a user testing, and then it will actually go into production, right? This might not be the case with a startup, right? So these are like some differences between how things work at a normal company or the startup as compared to a more mature product development organization like Google.
Right. That was quite a good insight on how different companies work and how Google works. Next question is to Saurabh, and this is also an interesting interesting one. The question asks, how do you make your product visible in the market? What do you do? What are the do's and don'ts if you want to see the customer that they are taking a notice of your products?
So it depends. I think I'll answer in respect to the domain that I am in. So we have a product for facial recognition, and the market segments which we really target is the enterprises and governments. So there are primarily two ways of having the product visible in the market. One is we work very closely with the influencers, and when I say influencers, it is the consultants or architects who are engaged with either the enterprises or the government organizations or PSUs who frame these kind of requirements. So we engage with them at an early stage, educate them on what the product can do, and also take this opportunity to educate, to ingest some of the USPs that your product might have, and this will in turn help you when the actual sales cycle is being formulated or the tender is being formulated. Because if you have educated a customer or a consultant on the features that are there, it is imperative that when he looks for a product like that, he'll definitely look for these points as a part of their checklist. So that is one way that you get the competitive edge. Of course, apart from that, you have the regular visibility mechanisms where you would have to invest either in some kind of visibility through exhibitions or trade fairs, or nowadays it can be through social media, it can be through digital campaigns that you might run around the product and get some visibility.
That was quite good advice, especially so many startups springing up from our college in the recent years. I think they will really heed to this advice if they want to, leave a mark in this market and to, make a mark. Next question is to Anand. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. Next question is to Anand. Now, as you know, most of us who enter into engineering are nurtured to stick to what we have been learning and keep sticking to that even after graduating. But we see many people still, changing their streams, going from engineering to MBA. What do you think is the thought process behind changing the streams from engineering to MBA to getting into a managerial role?
Okay, so well, getting into a managerial role, you really don't need an MBA for that. Okay, so that's probably a myth. So even engineers do get into managerial roles like technology lead, architect, right? Lot of different roles. But let me actually, probably get into the root of this. Uh, I think when you're 16, right, 16 or 17, when you actually complete your 12th standard, we are not really, in a position to decide what are we going to do with our rest of our lives, right? We really, most of us don't know, which is the best career option to take, what to study further, right? Uh, Engineering, I really think, is definitely a good career option, right? Because it is also a fail-safe bet, right? If nothing else, at least it was true till a lot of time that you end up getting a job. So I think that's why engineering is very popular, okay, especially in India, right? But yeah, having said that, why I think engineering also works well in such a case, if you don't know anything and you are able to get an engineering seat, take an engineering seat, right? Why it actually works. First of all, it gives you 4 years, right? 4 years to actually try figure out what you want to do, right? Second is that it definitely builds in some of the key skills that is required in any job. So, for example, analytical skills. Typically, engineers do a lot of math, do a lot of analysis, right? So it builds that skills. Um, Third is, it definitely puts you through some amount of pressure, right? In terms of, handling different types of subjects, different ways in which you handle, right from projects to exams to vivas and things like that. Um, Fourth is a lot of good institutions are there in engineering, right? Which actually give you a lot of other exposure apart from your general, what you say, tech skills, right? Um, so I think that's probably the reason that only after 4 years of engineering, or even probably after 2 or 3 years in your job, you end up realizing probably you want to do something else, right? Yes, you have got all the background knowledge with engineering, the background skills with having because you have done engineering, and background probably soft skills because you have done it from a great institution which provides you a lot of exposure, like Visit, right? So you are able to take that step much earlier in life, right? As opposed to probably much later, right? So I think that's where it lands at, rather than not figuring out whether to do engineering or not. I hope I was able to get to what you were hinting from the question.
Oh, definitely. That was quite a clear-cut answer. My next question is to Saurabh, and this is a quite common qualm among people who get into engineering. You know, uh, Despite having engineering degrees, some students are not very comfortable handling tech jobs. What do you think those students should look for? If they want to juggle between engineering and still have a job.
I personally feel a lot of times our perception of whether we like tech or not gets formulated based on the subjects that we study. And no, tech is not just about that. I mean, it's not just about programming. It's not just about learning ECADs or circuit designing. It is much more beyond that. So, in essence, I believe every engineer would have done an engineering degree, will have some kind of a technical acumen. He will definitely have a technical understanding, and that is what makes him suited for any kind of a tech role. It might not be a core tech role uh, as in a development role, but there are roles, as we saw on the sales organization, where your technical acumen can also drive a lot of business outcomes for the company, and those are areas which I think one should really capitalize at, because at the end of the day, I think what we are developing in the course of these 4 years is analytical skills. It's not that you are going to directly apply an ECAD or a digital design once you graduate. But what I see, look at it is that we are given a set of sources to learn tech concepts and then to apply. And in the whole process, we are grooming ourselves to understand tech. So whether it is the tech that we have learned in the academic years, or whether it is some new technology, we are actually groomed to understand any kind of technical concepts, which makes us a good fit for the other roles for any tech company.
I would just want to take a quick stab here. Anish, is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
So I think as Saurabh mentioned, right, basically engineering gives you a toolkit, right, but you need to actually use it, right? So unless and until you have tried using it, you yourself don't know whether you can succeed in that job or no, right? So that comes back to the fact that, how what is the number of projects that you have probably done. Were you able to do an internship where you actually were able to apply your knowledge or not, right? So these are the things which can actually help you be productive more sooner in your job as compared to much later, right? Because definitely there is a difference between what you just learn and what you end up doing or applying, right? If you start the applying process right when you are there in college, if you get chances or if you take that initiative and do those things, right? For example, the Tinkerer's Lab for the electronics students, right? I think if you're doing a lot of projects there and if you go and work in a similar area post your graduation, then you definitely know that, yes, this is something that, works for me and I'm able to do this job much better.
So the bottom line is that after entering engineering, it's not necessary that you will definitely find what you love. It takes time, and the crux of engineering is that you don't, always learn how to, work in the core sector, but actually try to become a problem solver. Moving on, and is there something you need to add? I may have just skipped something.
No, I think you're really good at summing up things.
Okay. So next question is to Anand. Anand, we know that you visited Visit in 2018 as a recruiter. Am I right? So it's not so often that we get to talk to a recruiter every day. So my question, and the question coming up in the minds of so many people who are going to sit for placements. What are the things that goes through a mind of a recruiter while they while they interview a candidate? What do they look for? What would you like to suggest that students should avoid and students should prepare for?
Okay. So there is no single answer to it, right? So my view might differ from, say, probably someone coming from a TCS or probably someone coming from another company, right? But if you were to ask me, what I would look for, so for example, the role which I came for, right, I expected two things, right? One is subject matter expertise on microcontrollers and on electronic circuits, and a demonstration that you have actually worked on those, right? That you practically implement something else, right? Because for me, I was hiring only two people, and it was very risky for me if I hired someone who has not made any circuits before and just knows that has. I was definitely looking at people who have worked on different projects, been a part of something like Robocon and things like that, right? And obviously tested them during the interview on the same skills, right? Whether they actually understood what they did or not, right? So knowing what you have studied, one, that is your theoretical background. Second, knowing what you have actually done, right? If you actually these two were the things that I was looking for, and it's very easy to look through if someone is just claiming to do something and not really done it, right? I think an interviewer has enough subject matter expertise to at least judge that, right? So these two things is something that is very important. Yeah, so
I
just
think.
sorry, Anish, I'll just add one more point. So at that point of time, I was really not looking at, someone being a great communicator, because that role did not really involve, right? But in case of some roles, yes, we would like to, I would like to look at soft skills as well, right? But it depends on role to role.
Okay. So I think this is an advice people will definitely take heed of, as our placement season will be starting soon after the lockdown, and being a training and placement cell coordinator myself, I do agree with what you say, and this is something everyone needs to focus on nowadays. My next question is to Saurabh, and this is especially for you. And being in the, as you said, you have been in the customer side, dealing with customers for a long time. This question comes from a student who is aspiring to be a management student, and is maybe probably going to start a startup. He asks that how do you deal with difficult customer stakeholders and clients?
How do you deal with difficult customers? Again, the answer lies in some of the content that I shared initially, which is to understand deeper into what are their ideas, what are their concerns. Being with the customer, because definitely, if someone is being difficult, there is a strong reason to it. If it relates to a product expectation, definitely he would have had some experiences in the past which make him more difficult to deal with. So the crux lies in trying to understand, go to the depth, and then try to identify what are his real pain areas, and then try to introspect into what you are offering, as to whether you are really trying to offer something which is solving the root cause of the problems that he has. So I no, at the end of the day, I think someone who is difficult will be great influencer if you are able to convince him. And I have found this more often than not that no, in customer environments, someone who who's the strongest opposition for pushing our technology also becomes one of the biggest influencers if you are able to convince him. So you have to use it to your advantage by spending some time with him and really doing justice to his concerns.
Absolutely. So basically, play your cards right, be the people person, and know your stuff. I think that will definitely help the person, and I wish that person best of luck. One more question to Anand, and being the person who has worked extensively with education-related business, this is a question that people have been asking for a few years now, looking at the rise of different education platforms. What do you think is the future of education-related businesses in India?
So I think India has one of the most number of people under the age of 20, right? I think more than almost 40 or 50% of the population is under the age of 20, right? And that's huge. So education and education related, companies uh, do have a lot to offer in India, right? Have a lot of scope in growth, right? And there are just massive problems to solve just because of the scale, right? Scale and accessibility. If you add, you don't have access to great colleges everywhere or great schools, right? From K to graduation level or even skill building level. There are massive opportunities in education, right? So opportunities, if you ask what are the kind of opportunities, I would say right from becoming a trainer, right, on products, being a course a subject matter expert, being an instructional designer, right? The instructional designers are people who actually build these courses, right, put them in the right format. Then being a product manager, right, working on the back end operations to ensure the development of these courses, right? And in general, on the course platform side, right, there is immense opportunities for people developing technologies. So if I just take, since Saurabh is here, right, there are actually technologies which are trying to gauge whether the child who is doing remote learning, right, whether he's interested in the content or not, or he's not able to understand content or not, right? It actually scans your face and tries to take cues to actually, intimate the teacher of that, right? So the amount of technology that can be embedded in this is just huge. And yes, it is going to be one of the sunrise sectors for the coming years.
That's a wonderful reply, and again, education is something, it's a long-term investment, and there will always be customers looking for this industry. Let me switch to a lighter note, and being that I'm meeting my seniors from 2006, and we have changed buildings altogether. I really want to know what was the experience back in 2006 being a Vesitian, especially from electronics engineer. Being a bachelor's in electronics engineer, I would like to know both of you guys experience as how the old Vesit was, how different was it, and what are the things you missed, and what are the things you enjoyed while you were back in Vesit, during that time.
So I don't know how to compare with the new visit, right? So of course we will, if any of us comes back, we will definitely miss the old building, right? The quadrangle where we spent like countless hours, right? Post the, post whatever, post the college hours, the ground. I'm not sure whether we have a ground now, right? That was something that we would definitely miss. Saurabh, feel free to chime in.
I think no, definitely on the societies, we definitely have much less options. So that is one thing we no, definitely had the privilege to join versus what you have right now. And the best part of Vesit was the timings, no, which allowed us to spend enough time on co-curricular or extracurricular activities. Because as I remember, our instructional day ended at I think 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. And hence,
2:30.
yeah, so we really had the time to invest in all these societies and extracurricular activities. And I think we, as Vesitians, we have the best peer circle. So I believe one of the biggest learnings, apart from faculties and academics, came from the peer circle that I had at Visit, and I think that would continue in these years. So that is something we should all be really proud of.
Listening to you guys, I feel that only the building has changed and the essence of Vesit remains the same. The extracurriculars, the instructional days, the societies, and the emphasis on learning through practical exposure. No wonder we have seniors and alumni like you. It was an absolute pleasure having you both on this webinar. And with this, I would like to end the session for today. I thank Anand and Saurabh for answering our questions and giving us such wonderful presentation, which will be really helpful for the upcoming batch of 2021 and the other batches. Again, this is Anish Jha, your host for today. There's a team which has been working on this project to bring you this webinar session. So please make sure to fill up the feedback form, as this will ensure your e-certificate. Again, good evening, and I'll meet you next time.
Good evening, Veset. Again, I'm your host for today, Anish Shah, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the session. And this session was brought to you by in collaboration with Tinkers by VReach. Joining us today for the live Q&A will be our guest speakers for today, Saurabh Gandhi and Mr. Anand Ramaswamy. We know that there's been so many questions that many students have been asking, and we are happy to get those questions answered. So let's just jump right into the question and answers. Okay, so the first question to Mr. Saurabh is by Pranay Mandal. What are your tips for those who share your definition for good work? What would you consider as good work, and what are some things one must follow to achieve that amount of good work?
Uh, yeah, thanks for the question. To be honest, the definition of good work that no, you might perceive changes over a period of time depending on the amount of experiences that you have as you progress. For me, when I started off after college, one of the key aspects was to kind of apply all the learnings that were inculcated during these 4 years, including the practical learnings. And as I mentioned earlier, it's easier. I mean, there's no thumb rule like that, but definitely working with a startup, it'll be easier for you to get the kind of work which is immensely satisfying, because no, you are one of the few members with the startup. So your job role will not be that siloed, and no, that will allow you to contribute to a lot of areas and move across and basically see to it and contribute to your liking. So definitely, I would say you should look for an early career in a company which allows you to move across roles so that you can understand what you are good at. And then as you progress, no, definitely you will be able to contribute based on the learnings that you have had on the job.
Right. My next question is to Mr. Anand Ramaswamy. Uh, Please provide tips to handle different stages and roles in an industry.
Tips to handle different stages and roles in an industry. Um so it's a very broad question. So there are lots of different roles that you might end up doing. But I think in general, if you ask, how to stay nimble or stay open to opportunities, one thing is give your 100% to what you are doing, right? Because that's the only way you will know whether you like it or not. Okay, so I happened to do a sales stint around 5 years back, right? I had never done sales before, right? But if you don't give your 100%, you will never know whether you are going to enjoy it or not, right? If you are half-heartedly doing something, you will say, "Oh, I just don't enjoy it," right? So that is probably number one that you should definitely do. Second thing would be be very open to approaching people and asking for help. Okay, uh, what is the worst that can happen? Someone might say that I don't know what you are looking for, or you might just be turned down, right? But more often than not, you find help coming through from different people. Yeah, right? Because they have been there in the probably the company or the industry, yeah, right? And people like to help. It's actually an innate nature of people to actually help, yeah, right? If they can, and it makes them feel important as well. So never think that, oh, whether should I approach this person and ask for help or not, right? I think you should definitely do. Third is never stop learning, right? I think a lot of people would have given this, answer before, but yeah, as cliched as it might sound, it is true. Try to keep doing something new. Try to keep learning something, if possible, on the side or on the job itself, because that is what gives you a fresh perspective to different things. right? So yeah, I think these would be top three things you should be doing from my experience, right? To stay nimble and to catch hold of any opportunity that might come across in an organization.
Right. Next question to Saurabh. Another question for asking for tips. What are some tips for the freshers who will be joining the corporate sector? What do you suggest they should do when they are new to the company, and what should they do to climb the metaphorical corporate?
One of the key things, and no, this is something which we as students tend to ignore. I mean, a lot has been discussed, so I'll focus on something which has not been discussed. The key things that I believe to excel no, in any company or an organization is that you need to network well, and the network need not be limited to your team. You need to have no, you need to build acquaintances cross functional across teams, and no, that is what will help you in the long run. And I also read somewhere what are the tips post I mean, for people who are resuming post lockdown, I would no, have the same tip, because at the end of the day, technical skills, soft skills are one thing, but this is an equally important aspect which no, kind of tends to be ignored in the initial phases of your career. So make sure you are building the right relationships as you progress.
Okay. My next question is to Anand, and this question comes from a student, Saptarshi Das. He asks, what are some of the key skills related to product management? And also, how did you manage to prepare for GMAT while you were working on your previous job?
Okay, so let me take the GMAT question first. So it's been a long time since I gave my GMAT, right? It's almost 9 to 10 years. But as far as I don't know whether the format has changed substantially since then. That is something that is worth you should definitely figure out. But at that point of time, for me, math wasn't the so there were like two things, right? There was math, there was quant, verbal, and the essays. So quant was not really that difficult, right? A practice of month and a half, I could more or less be in the 99 percentile of the quant always. It was not really difficult to be very frank. Doesn't have probably maximum till 10th level is what you have. Just that the questions are a bit tricky. Uh, the verbal is something in GMAT which is definitely challenging. Probably more challenging at that time as compared to CAT as well, right? And that is where it took some time to build my skills, take a lot of tests, go through a lot of content. One of the major things that helped me was doing end-to-end timed tests around 10 days before the actual GMAT. So GMAT is like at that point was a 4 hour exam, and just sitting through for 4 hours was a big pain, right? You're not used to sitting at one place in front of a computer for 4 hours answering questions, right? So I think that last 10 days practicing these 4 hour tests made me more acclimatized to just sitting there and giving those texts, and that really helps a lot. So that is something that I would definitely, be it a 3 hour, 4 hour, or 2.5 hour exam, but I would definitely urge you to practice that skill and get into that mode before you give that GMAT. But yeah, I think I don't think it has changed substantially. So math should be easy, but English should be something that you should work out. So yeah, so use your weekends to the best. Probably a couple of hours in the night, after you finish your work, should be good for that. Mm. Second thing on the product management side, right? So the skills, in fact, there's something that I had put even on the PPT, right? So analytical skills definitely are important, right? When I say analytical skills, making sense of data, making sense of some numbers, etc., as well as analyzing problems, right? So why a particular user might not want to use this particular app or feature, or why someone would want to use. When research says something, but you see that the actual usage is in a different way. Critically thinking and questioning status quo in terms of, oh, why can't I do this? Why not try this? No one has ever tried before, right? And I think overall insatiable urge to actually solve problems. They should keep you awake at night, right? Oh, this is a problem that I'm facing, and this is the problem that I want to solve. How do I, find the best way out? Right? So it's a quite a hands-on, kind of a role as well. So make sure you are ready to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty if required. Sometimes with coding, if required, sometimes with marketing or sales, etc. Right? To ensure that launch the product perfectly and it gains good traction. Hey, am I stuck or something?
So the next question is, after working with different functions, what are your call on starting your own ventures? This
This
question is to Mr. Anand first.
okay. Um, So, is it that would I want to start my own venture or
Yes, yes, it is like that.
okay, okay? See, starting a venture is a very interesting proposition. In fact, Saurabh and I used to talk about this like probably 10 years back, right? Wanting to start our own venture, etc. But it definitely requires a huge commitment from the individuals, right, who are starting it off, right? So it is definitely something that shouldn't be taken lightly, right? And not just commitment from your side, but it also requires tremendous commitment from your near and dear ones, right? Everything in terms of emotional support, in terms of monetary support, because you might not be earning for first 8 to 10 months or maybe even more than that, right? So it's like there's one saying, you typically go to friends, families, and fools to invest in your early venture, right? So that's where the money comes from. So all these kinds of support are very necessary. Uh, Having said that, yes, it would definitely be exciting to probably start something of my own. But yeah, probably having been in the industry, maybe not now. Who says? Who knows? Sometime later.
Your
Saurabh,
views
your
on it?
views.
Yeah.
Views as in? You asked
No,
Saurabh,
I am
right?
passing on the
Okay.
question to Mr. Saurabh. Like, what are your
Okay.
views on it?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Anand mentioned, we were always very fascinated about this thought earlier, but we should also realize, or someone who is looking to take the jump has to also realize that once you get into a startup, you might have to do a lot of things which probably are not your core skills. Maybe you do not like, because as a startup owner, you are required to fill in all the gaps that exist at each and every place in order to make the wheels run for you. So that is something you should be prepared to do. And no, once you have that mindset and probably have the funds to be able to sustain without a stable income for maybe a few years, it depends on the kind of startup that you plan. You should be taking the jump probably as early in your career as possible, because the more you delay, the more difficult it gets.
Okay. My next question is to Mr. Saurabh. How challenging is face recognition considering this pandemic, where people have their masks on their face?
This is a customer question, actually, very familiar.
Yes.
And probably if you were asking this question 10 years back, it would have been the death of the face recognition industry with masks on. But we all do understand the evolution of AI and deep neural networks, and that is something as a technology, it has helped make all the facial recognition engines much more robust, I would say. Of late, if you look at all the newer facial recognition companies, they are always, they have always been good at detecting people with partially occluded faces, which means that, even if your face is partially covered or you are giving me a side profile of your face, I will still be able to match it with your front image. So this is something which I would say masks is an extension to this capability, where end of the day it is covering the lower half of your facial features, but there are features which are still visible, and which will still make the technology work with a slight drop in accuracy. I mean, to be very honest, yes, there will be a drop in accuracy. Yes, it's a challenge, but it will still work.
Okay, so today's technology is quite capable of handling such kind of difficulties. My last
Yes,
question, okay, my last question is to Mr. Anand. The question is, does this level of requirements of soft skill directly indicate the closeness of the consent profile to the final customer?
Okay, I was getting this question. I was not very clear
Okay, I will
what
repeat
this
it once
question
again.
meant. I actually no. I can see the question on YouTube as well. I was just not clear what it actually meant. Uh,
Probably it might be the requirements of the skill from the customer point of view, like how beneficial it is going to be for the company.
Okay, so let me probably interpret it as that level of soft skills needed to be in a customer-facing role, is it higher compared to any other roles? Let me probably I think somewhere it means
Yes.
that. So, well, yes and no. Okay. If you are an individual contributor in a company, which typically you are when you just start off as a fresher, right? The level of soft skills required might be lower, right? But your progress in the company will definitely have to do with a certain amount of soft skills that you bring in, right? As Saurabh said, you definitely should know how to network, right? If you are faced with problems, who do you go and talk to, right? So you need to be confident in your communication, because if you even go talk to someone and if you can't tell them that your problem properly or precisely, you won't get the right answers, right? So in a customer facing role, obviously there are other soft skills also coming into picture, like being empathetic to the customer's problem, understanding it, working probably with multicultural set of customers, people sitting in the US, UK, Far East, anything, right? So yes, it does is definitely necessary, but at the same time also, as you grow within an organization, if you are not even customer facing, you definitely need to have uh, high amount of soft skill quotients in terms of managing the team, working with cross-functional team, and getting things done in general, right? Because after a certain point of time, what you are expected in an organization is get things done. So soft skills form an essential part of that.
Okay, that was a pleasant answer. And that concludes the session. I would like to thank both of the speakers as well as the whole VReach team for such a wonderful support during all those 21 days. This session was brought to you by VReach in collaboration with IQAC and IIC. This is Neeraj Patel signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.